the best use of the skills and talent and humor and, cruelty of comedian Andy Dick was on full display in MTV's The Assistant.
That's how it is here in Hollyweird. You get cut out.
On the surface, this reality show appears to be, your typical trashy MTV reality program. But actually, it is a hilarious, brilliant satire of shows like The Bachelor, The Real World, The Apprentice, America's Next Top Model, The Weakest Link, Survivor, American Idol, and more. Andy Dick was able to show Hollyweird's ugly face to perfection, and he used his own ugly face to get the point across. This dude turned an MTV reality show for frickin' teenagers into performance art. Mr. Dick should have single-handedly ended this particular genre of television, but no, his joke was too funny. Too funny for the world to truly understand. And these types of shows continue on to this very day. I still crack up every time I think of Andy Dick screaming, "This reality show is ruining my life!
This reality show is ruining my life!"
With that one line, I was like, okay, I get the joke. This isn't actually real, but everyone around Andy thinks it's real, and he's just f***ing with them, which is what Andy Dick does best. With people. And the best part about this MTV show, The Assistant, is that the contestants take it so seriously. They have no idea that they are the joke. And yeah, like I said, Andy just f***s with them the whole time. Breaking hearts, breaking dreams, and literally breaking material things. And yes, he pushes it to the point of abuse, but it's the funny kind of abuse that was totally okay back then, until the day that Andy pushed his outrageousness too far, into the realm of criminal.
I'm having not such a good day. I'm glad you guys are. I'm not.
So what can be said about Andy Dick that the paparazzi and nearly every judge from West Virginia to Los Angeles hasn't already said? He was once a rising star in the comedy world, with lovable, nerdy characters on hit TV shows before his demons grabbed a hold of him and took him down an over 25-year path of endless headlines, with his name oftentimes preceding the word arrested.
Am I a drug dealer? No, I am not. Thank you for asking, though.
In those years, he has compiled more mugshots than headshots, and went from star on the rise to registered sex offender. Yeah, so, I don't know how else to say this other than, what the f*** happened to Andy Dick?
No more questions! Wake up, bitch!
But to truly understand what the f*** happened to Andy Dick, we must begin at the beginning, and the beginning began when he was born on his birthday, 1965, South Carolina. Of course, Andy Dick was the class clown, and even gave himself the name Super Dick, which actually led to him being voted prom king. After graduating high school in the suburbs of Illinois, Andy Dick would study at the famed Second City and Improv Olympic Studio in Chicago, while also attending university.
You can't get emancipated to live on the street. Okay.
Andy would land a few bit parts on short-lived sitcoms, such as the Jamie Lee Curtis, Richard Lewis starring Anything But Love, and the Matthew Perry show Sydney. This was before Friends. But then Andy Dick would land his breakout role as a sketch player on the Emmy-winning The Ben Stiller Show. Despite the show being canceled far too soon, this hilarious sketch comedy show was a true launching pad for all of the talent involved, especially for the show's namesake, Ben Stiller, who really enjoyed working with Andy Dick so much that he gave him a role on his directorial debut film, Reality Bites, in 1994.
You're gonna make copies for me. Many copies.
After having memorable guest spots on The Late Show with David Letterman and The Nanny, Andy would land a co-lead role opposite Pauly Shore, who was in demand at the time, in the film In the Army Now, also in 1994.
I must say, though, this guy sounds really nice. He's got a villa right on the Adriatic Sea.
Jack, don't rub it in.
This was followed by a small part in the video game adaptation Double Dragon, also in 1994. 1994, the year of the dick. But then came 1995, which was also considered the year of the dick, when Andy's career took off. After appearing in the rebooted Get Smart series, Andy would land a starring role in the NBC series show News Radio, opposite comedy legends Dave Foley, Stephen Root, and Phil Hartman. The series would run for 5 seasons, yet was never a ratings juggernaut, but it was consistent and garnered solid reviews, which kept it on the air. During this time, Andy Dick would have brief appearances in several projects, including the Ben Stiller-directed The Cable Guy, a Sarah Silverman mockumentary called Who's the Caboose, a movie called Best Men, and he would even appear in a Sheryl Crow music video, while also getting his start in the world of voice acting with spots on Johnny Bravo and Jumanji. Yes, that's right, there was a Jumanji cartoon. It was during this time that Andy's demons began to take hold of him. He would attend AA meetings with his good friend Chris Farley, who was actually Andy Dick's sponsor at the time. But when Chris Farley passed away from a drug overdose in 1997, Andy Dick began to slide even further into his addictions. It is around this time that it is alleged that Andy Dick went to a Christmas party at Phil Hartman's house, where he and Phil Hartman's wife, Bryn, who had been sober for 10 years at the time, allegedly did cocaine with Andy Dick. That event, involving Andy Dick and his cocaine, is believed to have led Bryn Hartman to relapse, which would result in her murdering her husband, Phil Hartman, in 1998. While high on cocaine before turning the gun on herself. While many don't outright blame Andy Dick for this tragic event, one person has long held the belief that if Andy Dick hadn't gone to that Christmas party, Phil Hartman would still be alive. And that person is comedian Jon Lovitz, who took over for Phil Hartman on News Radio after his tragic death. The animosity between Jon Lovitz and Andy Dick was so bad that one day on set, Andy told Lovitz that he shouldn't be there, to which Lovitz replied, "Well, I wouldn't be here if you hadn't give Bryn coke in the first place." The show was canceled shortly after this feud, and has continued ever since, with Andy Dick one time approaching Jon Lovitz in a restaurant and saying to him, "I put the Phil Hartman hex on you. You're gonna die next. You're the next to die." Then later that year, Jon Lovitz reportedly shoved Andy Dick's head into a bar several times, bang, 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 at the famed Laugh Factory until security guards could separate them. And sadly, this would not be the only death of a News Radio cast member that Andy would be associated with. In March 1999, Andy and actor David Strickland flew to Las Vegas and spent 3 days partying it up in Sin City. And after that 3-day bender, David Strickland, while intoxicated, hung himself in his motel room. And Andy would be later questioned about the events surrounding Strickland's death. These tragic events in his life would lead Andy Dick down a spiral that began with his first run-in with the law on May 15th, 1999, when he crashed his car into a utility pole and was arrested for felony cocaine possession, with the charges being dismissed after he completed an 18-month drug program.
Don't do drugs.
And this would be the beginning of Andy Dick becoming more infamous for his off-screen shenanigans than his on-screen ones. He was never a leading star, but you could always count on him to show up in a small role and completely knock it out of the park. You have to admit, this is a comedian, this is an actor, this is a performer, this is an artist who is willing to push things well beyond the limit for the sake of a laugh or a tear. But yeah, no matter what, Andy Dick was always a scene stealer. Like, he pretty much steals every scene he's in.
You don't hang up on me, okay? You don't call me and hang up on me.
Such as all of his roles in movies like Bong Water, Advice from a Caterpillar, The Lion King 2 Simba's Pride, the English dub of Castle in the Sky. And he would have some pretty solid cameo spots in movies such as Permanent Midnight, Inspector Gadget, Loser, Road Trip, for which he would be nominated for a Teen Choice Award for Choice Sleazebag, as well as an MTV Movie Award nomination for Best Cameo in Dude, Where's My Car?
Don't hose me. Maybe later.
Oh yeah, and he was also in Zoolander. Can't forget Zoolander. Ben Stiller really likes working with Andy Dick. Mr. Andy would remain out of trouble long enough, just long enough, to launch his own MTV comedy show, titled The Andy Dick Show, in 2001, which would earn him his second Teen Choice Award for Choice TV Personality.
Andy Dick is teaching kids the value of hard work. I guess that's a crime, huh? Isn't it, America?
And of course, this was followed by appearing in several other projects such as Family Guy, Clone High, the ABC sitcom Less Than Perfect, as well as back on the big screen in small roles such as voicing Lenny the Weasel in Dr. Dolittle 2, and an uncredited cameo in Old School, which, I don't even want to talk about his scene, but you know what it is, and you laughed, you dirty fool, you did.
Way to give 110%.
In 2004, Andy Dick was back in the headlines, not for voicing Maurice in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, but for his less than savory behavior, for he was arrested in 2004 for mooning people at a McDonald's, which actually is kind of funny, but it's a slippery slope.
No, that's not what it looks like. Maybe a little bit. How was your nap?
Andy would then be invited to take part in the Comedy Central roast of Pamela Anderson, where he would proceed to grope the honoree several times. And there's like photographic evidence of this, I think, around the web if you want to search the World Wide Web. And also, apparently, there's evidence of him licking people's faces for no other reason than he thinks it's funny. And apparently, he also did this several times during the Comedy Central roast of William Shatner.
No. What this does is it brings us one step closer to living in the dumpster.
While in 2007, Andy was a guest on Jimmy Kimmel Live, where he had to be forcibly removed from the show after touching fella guest Ivanka Trump several times. But it wasn't just on TV that Andy was being a professional nuisance. In 2005, he would perform stand-up in Alberta, Canada, where he would drop his pants to an unsuspecting audience, revealing all of that stuff underneath Andy Dick's pants, whatever may be there. A pantsless Andy Dick was quickly ushered off the stage, and all of the remaining shows were canceled. The following year, Andy would call the audience at his stand-up show the N-word, you know the one, and he would be forced to issue an apology. But not long after, he would go on a radio show and call Howard Stern some extremely anti-Semitic things. Oh my goodness, Andy Dick, you just piss everybody off, don't you?
Stop hanging up on me. Both of you.
He equally offends everybody, right? Maybe? No. Okay. And sure, despite all this, Andy would continue to pop up on our screens in things like Arrested Development, ER, CSI, Community, Legit, Two Broke Girls, The Simpsons, and he also directed a film called Blonde Ambition in 2007. He appeared in something called The Comebacks, and even made a very interesting cameo as himself in Judd Apatow's Funny People. And of course, Ben Stiller just loves this guy and keeps putting him in movies, so he was in Zoolander 2.
Working with Ben Stiller was like working with Genghis Khan, okay?
But his personal life had now fully overshadowed his professional one. In 2008, he was arrested again for drug possession and sexual battery after pulling down the top of a 17-year-old girl outside a Buffalo Wild Wings. He pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor battery and marijuana charge, and was given 3 years of probation, and was ordered to wear an alcohol bracelet that would monitor his alcohol intake for a year. But sadly, it would be just 2 years later when Andy would be arrested again in West Virginia on charges of sexual abuse after he reportedly groped a bartender and a patron. After a 6-month delay, the judge showed him some mercy and said that if he could stay out of trouble for 6 months, the charges would be dropped, which he did. However, the 2 victims would later file civil suits against the actor. In 2009, Andy Dick would appear on the VH1 reality show Sober House, which he seemed to genuinely have a desire to get clean. But not long after, he would be back to his old ways, drunkenly showcasing his body to people who did not want it to be showcased to them in such ways. Such as the time in 2010 when he exposed himself outside Cafe Audrey in Hollywood, or at the 2011 Newport Beach Film Festival, where he exposed himself before urinating on a backdrop. Later that year, he would be sued by an audience member at one of his comedy shows after Andy rubbed his genitals on the man's face. So yeah, Andy Dick, he feels like he can just touch whoever he wants, wherever he wants, anytime he wants. And at the 2011 AVN Awards, he reportedly groped and stalked adult film actresses. In 2016, we would get a brief glimpse at the real Andy Dick when he posted a 20-minute video from the bedside of his dying brother. The video was a heartbreaking glimpse into the life him and his brother had endured, and how his early life had taken a toll on him as an adult. The video doesn't offer an excuse for his behavior, but it gives you an insight on why Andy Dick has had trouble staying sober all these years. He's like the definition of a sad clown. But sadly, in 2017, he would be back to his old ways. Andy Dick would be fired from a role on the independent film Raising Buchanan after allegations of groping people's genitals and unwanted kissing and licking of several crew members came out. That same month, he would be fired from a role in a film called Vampire Dad for, the exact same things.
Bon voyage, bitch.
It would seem in 2019, Andy had met his match when he allegedly tried groping a man who then punched Andy in the head so hard that he had to go to the hospital and be monitored for a brain bleed. Somebody finally struck back. Later that year, after the Me Too movement came into full effect, a paparazzi video came out of Andy Dick outside a restaurant, drunk, of course, and they were asking him about the Me Too scandals, Harvey Weinstein and Kevin Spacey, and of course, Andy Dick made light of the situation. But then things got a bit serious when Andy gets candid with a camerawoman after threatening to grope her, tearfully admitting that he contemplates committing suicide every day. This was another rare glimpse into a man who is completely out of control and is fighting lots of demons inside.
I'm not arguing this with you right now.
I don't want to argue with you ever.
His friends in the industry, from Ben Stiller to Judd Apatow, keep pulling for their friend, with Judd even casting him in the TV series Love to play a fictionalized version of himself who desperately yearns to be clean and sober. There was even a documentary made about him titled Everybody Has an Andy Dick Story that was due to premiere at the Chicago Comedy Film Festival in 2022, but was pulled from release when Andy Dick was yet again arrested, this time with a full live stream of the arrest, while living in an RV park for felony sexual battery. Andy was never a performer who was at the top of the call sheet, but he was someone you could always count on for a decent laugh. His most successful characters had him playing his nerdy persona, and he was the butt of the joke most of the time. But behind the scenes was a person who had to fight his demons, combined with his headline-making heartbreak that only made his demons get worse. He was a person who thinks he's being funny when the rest of the world stopped laughing long ago.
Wait a minute, though. My childhood stopped.
But it is telling that even in this episode, the bulk of this has been spent talking about his misdeeds and not his work. Like, I wish I could go into great detail talking about his performance in Sharknado 2, or even Employee of the Month, or his hilarious guest spot on Workaholics, and whatever he was doing on Sense8. There's still so much more to talk about, and we don't even have time to go through all of his legal troubles. From stealing power tools to even more sexual assaults, with the most recent happening in January of 2023, when he was arrested for public intoxication and failure to register as a sex offender, something that he became after being found guilty of groping an Uber driver in 2022. And even the time that he almost died from snorting fentanyl, which he thought was cocaine. Don't do drugs, everybody. It could be fentanyl. It's probably fentanyl. Don't just assume every drug from now on is fentanyl. Fentanyl. There is just so much to report on him that it would be a feature-length video. But the overarching story of Andy Dick is that of a man who seems to have lost touch with reality a long time ago. Probably when he was making that reality show, yeah, he lost touch of reality and didn't know what was real anymore, and it just spiraled and he just became a monster. But is it possible for him to one day get all of this figured out and get his life back on track? You know what? I believe in Andy Dick. I wish and I pray and I hope the best for him. Anything is possible, and yeah, everyone here at JoBlo, we genuinely hope that Andy Dick gets better, because we know that when Andy Dick puts in the work, he has proven that he can be an entertaining person. And yeah, we genuinely like to end these videos, these episodes, these video essays, these, what do you call these things now? But yeah, we like to end these on a happy note, and like to say, and you shouldn't give a fuck about what the happened to this person because they're doing fine, but I just can't really say that this time because I'm not really sure Andy Dick is doing fine, and you kind of should give a fuck about what's happening to him because yeah, there's a lesson there. And we really hope that this story has a happy ending. And you know what? If you follow him on Instagram, it looks like he's doing okay, but that's Instagram. You filter out the sadness, right? Right? But yeah, apparently, according to this, he's doing better than the headlines want us to believe, but I don't know if I believe that. I want to, though. But yeah, hopefully after all of these decades, Andy can get his stuff together, and hopefully one day we can forgive him, and he can make some good movies and TV shows again, right? So yeah, that's what the f*** happened to Andy Dick. Be careful, Andy, seriously.
Thanks for trying, though. Okay. And can you get me some coffee?